Did you know that, well, there are actually really stupid reptile laws and I guess amphibian laws as well? Now, in this video, we're going to be going over pretty much just really stupid reptile laws because they're just dumb. Anyways, roll the intro, let's get into it. So I think we're gonna keep it simple for the first one, which is Nebraska. Nebraska, in my opinion, might have the least stupid law out of all the ones in this video, because on paper, when you're just thinking about it like real quick, like it makes a lot of sense. Because, you know, Nebraska, you're not allowed to own anything that's, well, guess what? Threatened or endangered. On paper, that sounds actually kind of good because you don't want, you know, Joe Blow and Tammy something blah 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 owning some endangered animal that they smuggle out of some random country, you know, like Brazil or something. You know, that's pretty bad. But when it comes to reptiles, as you know, we have animals that we get into the pet trade that become endangered through means of just deforestation, over abundant collecting, just a whole bunch of numerous reasons, or animals that we have naturally just become that way over time because of, well, those reasons. I wouldn't even say naturally, you know what I mean. You know, over time, an animal that can be not one of those things can become that, which sucks. But in Nebraska, if that happens, you can't own that animal. But for example, the black-breasted leaf turtle is a really cool turtle. They run about $18 to $2,000, and they are in the pet trade. Now, breeding them is obviously a big old thing, because, you know, they are endangered, they're rare, and we definitely want to have some in the hobby, because if we have some in the hobby, maybe someday down the road, if done properly, we can reintroduce some back into the wild populations. Highly unlikely, but we would have some individuals in the pet trade at a minimum. But let's say you might have the best capabilities ever of breeding this species or some other endangered animal. If you're in Nebraska, my friend, you can't do that. Pretty dumb law. I'm not a fan of broad things, if you get my drift. When you just do a massive paint stroke over something, a lot of things tend to just not work out in the long run. That's why I don't think it's a good one. Let's move to the next one. Now, in the state of Colorado, there's probably something you're going to think of when it comes to your head, which is Colorado river toads. Surprisingly, we're not talking about them, but we're going to be talking about another one of their more questionable laws, which is the fact that you can't own more than 3 of a lot of salamanders and a couple other things. But we're going to specifically talk about the marbled salamander because I just felt like talking about them out of the ones I was reading. For some reason in Colorado, you can't own more than 3. The reason most likely, and well, it's this, because basically what the law is here to do is try to keep people from over collecting and this and that. The issue at the end of the day, it doesn't seclude the keeping and breeding of these animals. And as you know, if anyone who works with salamanders, or breeds them or does anything, breeding them can be extremely difficult, and most people who do breed them in the USA, because we're too lazy to do all the cool stuff and actually research like our friends across the pond, well, people just build a fence around where they are and they let them live outside and breed, because that most of the time, people who have them like that are, well, where they're native to. So it works out somewhat. But, you know, for some reason you can't own more than 3. Now, if you're really lucky, maybe you have 1 male and 2 females, that's it. But now, if you know anything about amphibian breeding or salamander breeding, let's just say you're gonna have a lot more than 3 once you breed them. Are you even able to breed this species in Colorado? On paper, you should be able to. There's no law saying you can't. But with the other law, you know, it's basically saying you can't own more than 3. And if you're going to breed this animal, you're going to have a lot more than 3 laying around. One, for breeding groups, you're going to probably need more than just 3 to get it going or have any good success consistently. And once they spawn, if they do, well, you're going to have way more than 3. So this animal just, it's kind of, you know, screwed over by laws, which sucks, because I'm sure there's probably a couple breeders down there who might be able to even breed them inside over there. And statistically, there should be at least 2 or 1 or something, because there's a lot of people in that state. Yeah, interesting. What do you think of that one? Let's move to the next one though. Now, Massachusetts, it's on the screen. I think you all know what I'm talking about anyway. But we all know that state, mostly, at least I think we do. Pretty cool, weird area if you ask me. But they have an interesting law, One, the fact that they do know what a monitor lizard is, which is kind of weird because, most of the time when it comes to lawmaking, it's very broad and very specific. But they chose to be very specific in a weird way. They basically said you can't own any monitor lizard without permits unless it's an Ackie monitor, which, as you know, is probably the most common pet monitor out here. But because of their size, cost point, behavior, there's just a whole bunch of reasons why, Ackies are, considered the most common and best pet monitor. But that's the only one you don't need a permit for, which is kind of dumb. Because, we have things like King's Monitor, which are in all sense a better monitor. The only part that makes them worse than an Ackie is pricing, and the fact that most are inbred because we don't have a large base population. They're from Australia, and we keep inbreeding because we're too lazy to just go ahead and, when you buy a pair, not buy a pair from one person who only has a pair. You buy from one individual, you buy from another, and that. Very simple. But, we don't do that. Well, that's for another video. But in this state, you can't own any monitor without a permit besides that species. Which on paper, I'm sure it sounds lovely because I'm sure you don't want Billy John something to own, let's say, a croc monitor, technically the world's largest monitor, because he had a spare $10,000 laying around, and he doesn't know anything about the animal. He keeps it in his bedroom, and it got out, and it maybe bit a kid outside or something. I don't know. That one makes a little bit of sense. I'm not against permits. I'm just against stupid permits, because why do you need a permit to King's Monitor? Those are behaviorally pretty good. And if it's like an intelligent animal thing, Ackies are still very intelligent, so why don't you need a permit for them? You get what I'm saying? It's very broad stroke, and if they just put a little effort into it, it'd be great, because I'm sure there are some monitors that we do need permittation for, and this and that. For example, Asian water monitors, massive animals, wild caughts all day, get them for dirt cheap, and almost everyone and their mama ends up getting one at some point. I haven't. I don't plan to, because I don't see a point in breeding them, and they're just not what I like. But yeah, animals that, animals this, super weird law. Let's move to the next one. Now, believe it or not, people actually keep reptiles and stuff in Alaska, which I thought was interesting. I know this because I had customers try buying animals from me, and it just didn't work out because, it's in Alaska, and the shipping, it's chaotic trying to figure that out. So, yeah. But guess what? Alaska, they have something called a clean list. It's kind of like a white list, basically just species you're allowed to keep. But it's very weirdly done, and I'm pretty sure I'm doing this one right. I may be wrong on it. Let me know in the comments, any people who may be watching from Alaska or just know better from this, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, but I could be wrong. So take this one with a good grain of salt. In Alaska, it looks like there's a clean list, and like I said earlier, basically you can keep certain things and can't, and the government says, hey, you can keep this group but not this group. Now, from my understanding, it's okay to keep crocodilians in Alaska, which is very interesting, and I'm wondering how that even works because it's Alaska. But something that I did mention is that no venomous basically lizards or snakes, which means obviously no beaded lizards, gilly monsters, or cobras. But what about animals with no medically significant venom? It did not specify any exceptions or permutation for something like that. So in Alaska, the freezing, I don't know, something I can't say on YouTube, you can own a crocodilian as Joe Doe, it looks like, but you can't own a hognose snake as Joe Doe, which one is a far better pet and are way easier to keep and work with and do all this and that. But you can keep a crocodile, which is actually, a danger to the owner if they don't know what they're doing, which is crazy. Alaska, who would have thought? I didn't, so I did my research, and I'm still a little confused on it. So again, let me know if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure I'm right, but I may be a tad bit wrong. Let me know. It was very hard to understand. It was very broad. It was very poorly worded. Yeah, so any Alaskans who are watching this, anyone who just knows better, let me know, please. So, in California, they do something pretty interesting. They basically ban genuses, which have really dumb things because, a lot of toads that we have in the US are, in other parts and of the world, But you can't keep those animals because they have a native relative here that's very distant, which is really stupid. But we're not going to talk about any toads. We're actually going to talk about axolotls, something very common in the pet industry. But, you know, I'm talking about them because they give me more clicks. Yeah, you know, the axolotl you cannot legally own in, well, guess what? Cali. That's because of they have that law, you know, I mentioned earlier, we can't own things in the same genus. That's because they're actually related to tiger salamanders, and the reason this law is mostly in place is to prevent hybridization. Now, if anyone who knows anything about tiger salamanders, they tolerate higher temps far better than an axolotl. Like, way more. In fact, an axolotl is going to be more likely to eat a tiger salamander in that situation. But it's definitely not impossible for hybrids because they do exist. But the thing is that an axolotl could not survive in the Californian wild for any long, sustainable situation, which is really interesting. But I also like to know it's a dumb law because, oh hey, Anoles varius, how you doing, pug? I love that animal. But, you know, it's a really dumb law because the animal cannot survive in the wild, but they're trying to protect the wildlife from this and this and that. But it's honestly dumb if you ask me. And I know it's a dumb law because I know people in California don't follow it. They don't. I've been offered axolotls in a trade from a Californian. And then they were mad that, you know, I wasn't down the trade. Because the animals could have been taken when they left or on the border of Cali. Not to mention, they were fairly common axolotls, but since they were illegal over there, they were, you know, valuable because, you know, the black market. I literally know the law doesn't work because there's a black market trade of axolotls in California. It's stupid. Just really stupid. Anyways, this is the end of the video. If you liked it, give me a like, a share, a comment, share it to your friends and family, and goodbye.